So basically now what I'm going to do is actually create the projection cage. And instead of using the projection modifier to do that, I'm going to use the modeling tools to do that. So I've got my daemon low res. I'm just going to go ahead and make a copy of that over here. I can hide this. We're just going to use this to come back to get our shape to come back down. Now I'm going to grab my low poly mesh and just go ahead and drop a push modifier on there. I'm going to start by just kind of pushing that surface out a little bit. So again, instead of using the projection modifier itself, I'm just going to use the modeling tools within Max to fit my cage. So basically what the process here is, I want to make sure that I don't have any intersecting faces from this version of the model to the medium poly model. I want to push that out away from the surface slightly so it kind of sits outside of that. The reason I'm doing that is because the projection system in Max basically casts a ray along the surface normal and tries to intersect that with the high poly surface. Now, if this surface is kind of intersecting with that, when it casts a ray down, it's not going to hit anything. So if you push this out away from the surface, when it casts its ray down, it'll actually hit that high poly surface, and you'll get a nice result in your normal map. So you could actually do this whole thing that I'm about to show you in the projection modifier itself. I'm just going to do it here because I think there's a few more modeling tools outside of the projection system that make this a little bit easier to deal with. So let's convert that back to an editable poly. I'm going to come down to the sub-object mode, turn on my edge faces. And I've got a couple little scripts up here, although I don't have the icons loaded. But these are scripts that you can download from ScriptSpot, written by Bobo. We've taken them and modified them a little bit at High Moon. But basically what this is going to allow me to do is symmetrically select sub-objects in my scene. So for instance, you see if I select those two vertices, I get a symmetrical selection over here, so I can really quickly get symmetrical selections and edit things. So I'm just going to grab one of those vertices, move it in local space, and I can just start pulling these things out to kind of correct that surface. And you can see, because I'm using that symmetry modifier, let's change this to a user view so we can zoom in. You see, because I'm using that symmetry along the x-axis script, when I select a vertex over here, it automatically selects it on the other side, so I can very quickly edit things. Switch that to view space and just move those down a little bit. Go back to local. Also, if you're working in local space, when you're in sub-object mode, especially on the vertices, essentially that's going to move that vertex straight out along normal to the surface. That's kind of a handy way of kind of pushing out vertices. So you can see I can pretty quickly just kind of come in here and symmetrically pull this stuff out. I'm just kind of trying to include that surface underneath so that I don't have any surface intersections. So that's kind of the process for that. Zoom in. I'm using strokes, by the way, to change my viewport. So if I pull down on the middle mouse button, it puts me in arc rotate. If I use the middle mouse button in motion upward, I get a zoom region tool. If I go to the right, I get a pan tool. If I go to the left, I get my zoom tool. So just keep on selecting these things. Let's turn on ignore back facing so I can actually select part of that I want. And just pull those out. I'm actually selecting the jaw back there. So again, great script by Bobo. I highly recommend that everybody go out and check it out. It's called Symmetry, I believe. And what we've done at High Moon is basically the script by Bobo, the way it's set up is that generally when you select one half of the object, it'll wait for a viewport draw to kind of update itself. And what we've done is just gone ahead and removed that call to wait for the viewport update so that it just automatically selects things. We've just kind of speeded it up a little bit. And the reason that he added that call is just so that especially if you were working on a very dense surface, that you could have problems with performance if you were constantly updating the scene. But as long as you're not going too crazy, it works. It's worked so far. It's worked fantastically for us. The other modification that we made to it is in the customized symmetry settings that he provides. I think he sets this to a default of like 8. So we've just changed that to an odd number in the script by default. So we set it to 11, and basically what that does is, if you've got it set to an even number of voxel divisions, things that lie directly across the plane, sometimes from front to back. So if you've got a sphere that's got 8 segments, that segment right in the center, if you try and select those vertices, it won't, because those vertices actually lie right in the voxel plane, so it's not in one voxel or the other. So you can just kind of experiment with that. We set it to 11, and that seems to be a good number. Occasionally, you'll find vertices on your mesh that, for some reason or another, sit inside of the division between the voxel hit tests that he's doing in the script. So you can just change the number of voxel subdivisions, and it'll kind of correct that. It's a great script. So now that I've kind of fitted that, I've still got a few little errors in there, but you guys can see the process of basically generating this cage. I'm going to unhide my copy. And the reason, I'm going to show you why I made this copy. It's basically, now that I've got an original, I can just take this copy after I create my normal maps and put a morpher on there. Pick this original and just morph that back down to its original shape so that it's ready to go. Another alternative to putting a morpher modifier on the stack and choosing the original is just to select that original, come up here to Tools, Channel Info. I'm just going to grab his poly channel and copy that and select this version that I've edited and just go ahead and paste that channel info on there, and you can see that it sucks it back down and drops this channel info paste onto the stack, and then I could just convert that. So that's another good way of kind of preserving your mesh. So you just make a copy, edit this one a little bit, make sure you don't add any vertices or cut anything in. You don't want to change the vertex order or the face order, but you can kind of change it around, mess with it, and then put it back to its original state after you're finished with those edits. So now I'm going to go ahead and open up another version of this file that I've already got set up. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit. So you can see in this file I've got my version of the cage that I've pushed out on the surface and kind of cleaned up that cage a bit. I've got my original model that fits very closely. I also have my medium res model in there, and I can just hide that or delete it. I don't really need that anymore, so let's just hit delete and get rid of that because we're not going to use that. And you can see this box right here. This is actually the very high dense 2.2 million poly model, and I've set that to view as box so that we don't have viewport problems, so that we can actually work in the file interactively. That's also another good tip for you guys, is if you're bringing in very dense models into 3D Studio Max, it's a good thing to just go ahead and turn off display geometry in your viewports before you import that. That way you'll get a much quicker refresh of Max after it imports. It won't have to wait for the screen to redraw after it imports these huge models. Let's go ahead and select that model. I've dropped a projection modifier on there, and I don't know if you guys have all probably seen the demo of the projection cage, where you basically select the projection cage, come down into the sub-object mode, and essentially do the same process. You can select sub-objects and then use the push sliders to kind of push that out on your cage. I've basically just done the same process but used the modeling tools instead of the projection cage, because you get a few more options using just standard max modeling tools than you do with the projection cage. So it speeds things up quite a bit. Also, when I apply that projection modifier, what happens is if you've got that always update slider turned on, what will happen is it'll try and project that, your cage will go funky, and then you have to reset the cage. So since I've already kind of pre-shaped my cage, I don't have to do anything to this projection cage. I can just reset it to its default values, and I'm ready to render.